Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to the part of the video where we glue the glass back on this display. So you can see here it's powered on, and then just double checking to make sure the touchscreen is going to function for us and that we don't have any real issues with it. Now, the reason why I want to do this is because once you put the glass on, it's kind of a tedious process. So you notice as I go through, I kind of check it, make sure everything's functioning properly for us. Just check the back button and the multitask button here, make sure they're all going to function properly for us, which they are. So we're looking pretty good here. The next step here is to go ahead and put this into our mold. Now I like to use a local mold. You can buy them off of eBay or a couple other places out there. And this is a pretty helpful little mold to make sure that the glass is lined up correctly. That way when you put it back into the housing of the phone, everything's going to line up properly. The glass is going to fit back around the edges. You don't have any lifting. So it's something that I would suggest doing. So just removing the display off of the phone pieces here. We'll go ahead and just set this thing aside. And we'll pull out our mold here. Now you could just glue this on top of the display without having the mold, but again, like I was saying, it's just so helpful to have this thing. In my mind, just makes the whole process a little bit easier. So we'll go ahead and put this in. Should put it in the right way here. So whoopsie, there we go. Alright, so everything's looking good. It's going to fit right in there. Now, the next step that you can do here is either tape this little connector down or just leave it underneath. And then we're going to go ahead and clean the display again. So like I was saying, you can clean it in the mold a little bit further if you left the little tiny dust bits on there or whatever. So just take a few seconds, microfiber cloth, some isopropyl alcohol, and just go ahead and clean it. Now, it doesn't have to be streak-free. And I think that's important to say. I spent a lot of time on some of the earlier displays trying to get them to be streak-free, so there was nothing on them. But I find that if you have a little bit of streaking, like when you clean a window with Windex, that kind of stuff, you don't want any debris, you don't want anything left over, no oil, no residue from the goof off, any of that stuff. You want it to be nice and clean, but it doesn't have to be streak-free. You can have even some fingerprints on it, and the glue will actually cover that up. But so I just work my way down, make sure everything's nice and clean. I do have a blower as well. You can use like a baby nose suction. I don't know if you've ever seen those before. You can use that to blow dust off. I don't have a dust-free environment here either. I mean, I'm an amateur phone repairer. I'm not a professional. I don't have a business or anything. So just take your time and make sure the dust bits are out of there as well. Alright, so we're looking pretty good with our display. It's looking pretty clean. See, there's a little dust bit on there still. Make sure we get that off here in just a second. Alright, now we have our UV light. This is just a gel nails solid cure, whatever the crap it is. Really, it's just a salon nail gel cure machine. It has 3 UV lights on the inside, or actually 4 UV lights on the inside. That's going to help us cure the glue of this LOCA. You can see that it turns on, it's nice and blue. So we're going to leave it off. This stuff gets pretty sticky pretty quick. So I'm going to use this X Factor Sticky Icky 1000 ultra low viscosity. I find a lot of success with this glue. Low yellowing, that kind of stuff. We have our new piece of glass here as well. One of the tricky thing with the new piece of glass is finding something that's going to match the actual true color. I can see it seems like there's a lot of OEM displays out there, but OEM glass is tricky and fairly hard to come from. Now I'm going to take a spudger, and this is a pretty important part. This spudger will help us lower the glass down nice and slowly as we pull it out. Basically, you're going to put the glue on, and then we have to put the glass on top. We have to make sure there's no bubbles in there. And how that happens, how you get bubbles, is if you let it fall down too quick onto the display. So you have to take your time and do it right the first time, and a steady hand is a pretty big thing to have in this particular repair. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and pop out the glue here, and we're just going to make an X shape. Now I've been told that I used too much glue, and honestly, whatever. I like to use a little bit more so it's a little bit easier to work with. I'd rather it be easier to work with and have some glue along the edges than have it really hard to work with. Now on the AMOLED screen, it doesn't really matter if you use too much glue. I mean, you don't want it overflowing across the edges and use a ton, but it does matter more on an LCD screen than an AMOLED. as there's no backlights for this to seep into. If you find little dust particles in there or any little bubbles, just take a tool and kind of poke them out or try to pull them out before we start the glass portion. Because once that starts, there's not really any stopping it. Now I just cut a little portion out and make sure my bulbous head doesn't get in there. It's looking just all over it for dust particles. Next step is to go ahead and take the backing and front off of your glass here. Make sure there's no dust particles on the back of it. I've had that happen before. There's some dust on there. Go ahead and just line it up properly. You want to make sure that you're putting it on the correct side, so the speaker portion goes closer to the ribbon cable at the top, and the home button goes towards the bottom, further away from the ribbon cable. Now we're going to gently lay this piece of glass down. You want to take your time, go nice and slow. We want to make contact down here at the bottom first by the home button. And the reason why we're using this here is because there's a cutout that I can use the tool in at the top. Now, if you use this method, I promise you it's 1,000 times easier than just trying to pop it on there with your fingers. Just take your time and let it sit nice and slow. So make contact down there. Another way to do it is to put your finger down here at the bottom, kind of hold it as a hinge, and let it drop down nice and slow. Now, I might be slightly paranoid about this, but this is your first time doing this. You may have to do it a few times. So if you get a ton of air bubbles in it, or it falls, or any of that stuff, you can go ahead and pull it off, nice and gentle, clean both sides of it, get all the LOCA glue off of it, and try again. I do that all the time where I get a bubble right in the center of it, and I can't get it out. So what I'll do is pull it off and clean it again. So now you can see we made contact down here at the bottom. The glue worked its way up. There's no bubbles so far. Another place where you get bubbles is right here when these two pieces attach. If they attach bottom to top instead of in the middle, that will cause a bubble to form, and those can be really tricky to get out because it'll be right here dead center. So I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of pressure to make sure that the two portions touch in the middle rather than on a side. So I'm just going to pull the spudger out a little bit, and the glass will fall slightly lower and kind of work its way up. Now you don't want it to fall all the way down because there may be some ridges in the glue, and you may have to have one part touch before the other, and then it's going to create bubbles. That seems to be where it happens the most. Just taking my time, and patience is key at this point. And just gently pull the spudger out. You may have to hold the glass a little bit while you do it. If you see anything where you look like it could form a bubble, just kind of put your finger on top of it. You don't have to put a lot of pressure. This stuff is this low viscosity stuff is pretty good stuff, so it will really even itself out. So again, just gently pulling it out nice and slow and letting the LOCA work its way up. So I'm a little worried about this portion right here. It's kind of a V shape. I want to make sure that it's not going to fall in. So I'm just putting my finger on top of it. Not a ton of pressure, just a little tiny bit. Again, just taking time, just gently pulling the spudger out. You can see right here to the top now. And now we can just go ahead and slowly pull it all the way out. Give it a second to kind of lay itself down. Now the goal is, and one of the trickiest parts now, is that we have to get it to spread out to all of the corners and in the middle here as well. So just give it some time. You can kind of lightly touch it to kind of get it to go the way you want. Now if you do have a bubble and it's kind of near the corners, you can go ahead and try to push your finger across the top of the glass and try to get it to wiggle out that way. A lot of people have said that if you put too much pressure on the screen that your LOCA will yellow. I haven't had that issue, but then again, to be honest with you, I don't keep a lot of these phones for a long period of time after I do this either. So you may just want to be a little bit gentle with the amount of pressure that you're pushing on it. I'm just going to let it sit. Sorry, my bulbous head's going to get in the way here. Well, I'm just checking the corners to see if the glue is all the way out there. And if the glue's not reaching to where you want it to be, just put a little pressure. Kind of just slide your finger across the screen. It'll kind of push the glue in the way in which you want it to go. So right here, it's not right where I want it, so I'm just going to use my spudger, give it a little tiny bit of pressure to move in the way that I want it to. So right here, definitely not. Now you could just let it sit here for a good 30 minutes and see how far it gets. I mean, a lot of times the glue will kind of work itself out. And one thing that's a little bit tricky with LOCA is there's no matter what you do, there's going to be a little bit higher or lower in one spot. You want to get it as even as possible, and that can be a little bit hard to do. Now, if you're really having a hard time and you can't get it to kind of go where you want it to, I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to press on the back of the display, and then press a little bit, tiny bit on the front, and that'll get the glue to flow where you want it to. Now once it makes contact with the edge, it's almost like a suction. It'll kind of suction itself down to the display. So once you get at that point, it's a little bit trickier for it to kind of go back. You may have to run your finger across a little bit to kind of get it to spread itself out. Now if you use just a little too little bit of glue, you may not be able to get it to really hit in these corners. And what you can do in that scenario is turn your UV light on, press down in the corner, and just dip the corner under the UV light for a little bit. That'll stiffen the glue up a little bit. Then you can pull it out. Make sure you do that to all four corners, or make sure everything's really where you want it to be. So again, you want to make sure that you spend your time here. This will probably be the most noticeable part along the way if you've done everything correctly. You don't want bubbles or your glue not to be all the way to the edge. It can be an eyesore when you stare at your screen for a good 5-6 hours a day. So I was rubbing my spudger across it, trying to get the glue to just really hit in this corner. This corner is the one that's so slightly pulled up when I was messing with the mobile DM wire. So I just want to make sure it's got all the glue in there that it needs. It seems to be pretty good now. I don't see any additional edges or anything that needs to be cleaned. What I do is if you have a lot of excess glue on the top of the display now, just take a microfiber cloth, maybe just a little bit of alcohol on it, and try to clean up as much of it as possible. If the glue cures on top in between the mold and the display, it can be a little tricky to get out of the mold once it cures up, so something to be aware of. I'm going to go ahead and flip on our UV light here, and we'll go ahead and get this started. Again, just double checking, make sure that there's no dust particles or bubbles in there. It can be a little hard to see on the background, the back kind of display, so you may have to kind of tilt it into the light to make sure. Just look in the back to make sure there's not a ton of excess glue there as well. And we are looking pretty good. Just make sure that wire, the display cable, stays underneath the display. Go ahead and flip the UV light on now, and we can just slide it underneath. Now, the first initial stuff, I mean, this stuff will cure or stiffen pretty quick, so we're not going to put it in for a ton of time. The goal is that we just want it to be enough where it's stiff enough, it'll stick to the glass where you want it to, but not to the point where it's going to be lodged into the frame forever. So if you have some glue just kind of sitting here on the sides, it's a good indicator of how done it is. It doesn't take a ton of time, so now we're going to flip it around and put it in the other side. Give it a little bit more time. See if we can get it to set up. pull it out, just take a quick look at it. Just check the glue here. Seems a little bit stiffer. You can see that it's kind of set up. Not exactly where we want it to be just yet. Now the reason why you want it to be a little bit stiffer is if you try to take the display out of the mold and the glue is still very liquidy or very loose, then the display might slide away or become uncentered from the piece of glass. So you don't want it to be extremely stiff, but you don't want it to be extremely loose either. So it's kind of a fine point of how long do I leave it in for. And every glue is a little bit different, and even how old your glue is could make a difference as well. So you might have to kind of play it by ear and just go with what you think is going to be easiest to get out. So now we're just going to kind of push up on the corner nice and slow. Try to hit this glass only and see how it looks. We're looking pretty good here. Go ahead and just pull it away. Now the other trick with this is you're going to have a lot of glue around the sides, and we don't want that to cure on there or else it won't sit flat. So we're going to go ahead and take our cloth here and just clean it all up and work our way around the edges of the device here. We want to clean down the sides of it on the top, get all that liquid glue out of there for two reasons. One is that we don't want it seeping into the phone and causing any shorts or anything like that. We also are going to put it back under the UV light a little bit longer to cure, and we don't want it to harden to the point where we can't get it off. We'll have to use a razor blade, and that'll nick up the front color and all sorts of stuff. So it's easier now just to spend a little bit of time with possibly a spudger, which is what I'm using now, underneath a microfiber cloth, and just run down the sides of the device here and make sure that all of it's cleaned out. We don't want any residual glue anywhere on the back side of this phone. Now another thing is right above the speaker here, you can kind of pool a little bit, right by the proximity sensor at the very top where that little copper piece of tape is. So you want to be careful, but try to clean underneath that a little bit as well. Normally what I'll do is I'll take a spudger and wrap it around a microfiber cloth and then use that to clean under that display cable up there. Just taking my time, making sure there's no residual glue. You also want to make sure there's nothing left on that little logic board ribbon cable up there that controls the display. So make sure there's nothing on there. If you did get LOCA on there, you'll want to go ahead and clean that off with some isopropyl alcohol and let it dry for a little while. So now what we're doing is we've got all the glue cleaned up off the back where we want it to be. We're going to put the UV light over it, and the goal is hopefully it'll cure any residual glue so nothing leaks out of the phone when we put it back together. A lot of people will say that the LOCA will short out the screen or cause it to do funny stuff, but it seems like a lot of it, for me, is that this glue kind of leaks back out and causes havoc on the interior portion of the phone. So just take your time and make sure that it's nice and clean, and then spend a little extra time just putting it back in here upside down to let it bake in your UV light for a little bit. Now you could leave it in here for quite some time. I mean, you could leave it in here for half an hour and make sure the glue is nice and solid. And that's what I would do. For the purpose of the video, I'm not going to spend a ton of time putting it under there for the video. I'm going to flip it back over now that it's removed from the mold. I'm going to let it sit under there for a good solid 10 minutes or so. So I'm just going to cut that portion out and skip back here towards the end. Now really at this point, your display is done. You're just going to take it out from underneath the UV light and clean the front of it off. Make sure there's no residual LOCA on the top of it. Just use some isopropyl alcohol and clean it up. Now if you have any questions about this process, hit me up in the comments. I'll do my best to answer those for you. If you want to watch the reassembly video, that'll be down at the bottom as well. Now I'm just going to add this into the display removal and reapplication I've already done. So you'll see it'll be a white phone instead of the gold phone. It's really kind of time intensive to make these videos, so I'm just going to use what I already have rather than just make a new one. One thing that I definitely suggest doing is make sure you test it before you put it all back together. Unfortunately, I didn't record the testing portion of this one because I'm apparently a fool, but just something to be aware of. So if you have any questions, hit me up. You found the video helpful, hit that like button. You want to see future videos, subscribe to me. I post up a couple a month. As always, I appreciate you watching, and I hope to catch you on the next one.